Well, this weekend we heard the first big interview with former Republican presidential nominee Mitt Romney, as he and his wife Ann sat down with our own Chris Wallace on Fox News Sunday. Among other things, the former candidate suggested some of the country's current budget troubles can be blamed on what he believes is the president's acting as a constant campaigner.
How do you think the president has handled the sequester, the $85 billion in automatic spending cuts?
Well, no one can think that that's been a success for the president. He didn't think the sequester would happen. It is happening. To date, what we've seen is the president out campaigning to the American people, doing rallies around the country, flying around the country, and berating Republicans and blaming and pointing. The president has the opportunity to lead the nation and to bring Republicans and Democrats together. It's a job he's got to do, and it's a job only the president can do.
Joining me now, Brad Blakeman. He's the former deputy assistant to President George W. Bush, and Bernard Whitman, who's a former pollster for President Clinton. It was interesting to hear him accuse the president of being in constant campaign mode, because now it seems that there's a consensus on that in Washington. That's not a left or a right or a Mitt Romney versus President Obama thing. That is true, but the White House says we have to do that because we have these obstinate Republicans, and we are sick of hearing no with everything. We're going directly to the American people over the Republicans' heads. And so there's not a lot of denial of the constant campaign mode, although there is a question about whether it's good or bad. Brad, I'll let you take a step.
Well, there's a blending between campaigning, going out and using the bully pulpit, and then rolling up your sleeves and doing the work. Apparently the president loves to campaign, but he doesn't like to roll up his sleeves. He doesn't even like to meet with his own leadership. But the fact of the matter is, if the president did roll up his sleeves, invite, as a matter of course, every week President George W. Bush met with the leadership of both the House and the Senate, his party and opposition. The reason why he did it is he must stay engaged. If the president wants to sell policy, the best way to do it is to work on that policy in Washington and not go out.
Is that true? President Bush met with the leadership of both
absolutely. I know. I scheduled him. I was in charge of his calendar. And one of the things the president was very engaged in is meeting with not only his own leadership but the opposition. He had to do it. It's not something presidents look forward to, because you know when these guys come in, they're usually asking for a lot. But the point of the matter is, you must be engaged to be president in order to effectuate policy. Going over the heads of the people, the decision makers, will never get you anywhere.
Brad, Bernard, one of the things that Mitt Romney said was the president is berating Republicans and blaming and pointing at them, and he says that causes them to retrench and put up a wall and to fight back. It's a very natural emotion.
That shocked me, because that is a natural emotion if you're a 3-year-old child. You don't get your way, you don't like the circumstances, so you take all your marbles and you go home and you get angry. We are dealing with serious issues, and frankly, I've got to disagree with my friend Brad, because the best way to actually effectuate change in Washington is to get out of Washington and go to the people and try to leverage the will of the people to get the business of the country done. That's exactly what another very effective two-term president did, Bill Clinton. That charge was leveled against him time and again. But when you have a country that is absolutely united in a particular approach that we should have tax increases and
are we united on anything right now?
Let me say why. Tax increases and spending cuts, a combination to solve the deficit problem. That's what won the election for Obama, and consistently in polls, 3/4 of the American people want that approach, but the Republicans in Congress refuse to accept that. He's got to go to the people to try to put pressure on the representatives to come to a deal that the public wants.
Go ahead, Brad.
Well, let me tell you something. Here's the president's biggest deficiency. In 1979, they passed the Budget Control Act, requiring the president to submit a budget on or before February 1st. What is the excuse for the president to be on the road campaigning when he hasn't even submitted a budget to Congress? There's 3 things the president needs to do in that budget: how much we're going to spend, how much revenue we're coming in to, and how much the deficit is going to be increased. He hasn't done any of that. How are we to move beyond self-inflicted wounds of sequester and continuing resolutions if the president fails as a matter of law to do his job?
I want to ask you about this. If one of the risks in going directly to the people and above the heads of the lawmakers is that may work if you've got credibility with the peeps. But if you don't, then it's less and less effective and more of a waste of your time. And the president and those who represent him took a little bit of a hit in that department last week in the build-up to the sequester, when the Education Secretary Arne Duncan came out and said that teachers were being laid off already, getting their pink slips already thanks to the sequester. Well, that turned out not to be true, and the Washington Post gave it 4 Pinocchios. And then the president himself said this about janitors at the Capitol last week.
Starting tomorrow, everybody here all the folks who are cleaning the floors at the Capitol. Now that Congress has left, somebody's going to be vacuuming and cleaning those floors and throwing out the garbage. They're going to have less pay. The janitors, the security guards, they just got a pay cut. And they got to figure out how to manage that. That's real.
Well, no, it isn't, says the Washington Post. They gave him 4 Pinocchios on that claim, too. So the problem is he losing credibility on these items by overstating his case?
Well, I don't think so. I mean, clearly you have to get the facts right or you endanger yourself down the road. But what the president is trying to do is bring the real world impact of the sequester to the American people, because it's a very sort of obtuse, complex term. People don't really understand it. But what people will understand, particularly in the Northern Virginia area, is that people are going to be dramatically affected. They're going to be furloughed. They're going to be pay cuts. They're going to have to do the same amount of work with less dollars. And I think that
talking about the military cuts.
Yeah, and I think that we want to take this sort of abstract idea and make it clear that these cuts actually do matter. So for the Republicans to simply say, let's let the sequester happen and not recognize that there's going to be serious real-world negative impact is very, very dangerous. And I got to say, you know, the president's approval rating throughout this has been pretty darn high.
That's true, but as a practical,
it's actually gone down this week.
But I mean, as a practical matter, both parties let the sequester happen because the Republicans submitted their plan to avoid it, and the president said no. Then finally, the Democrats had their plan. No, they couldn't agree, and they're so. I mean, truly, Brad, they're irresponsible in Washington because they agreed to something that both sides hated, thinking we'll deal with it down the road, and they failed at least 3, probably 5 times to deal with it. So they've all got. They're all guilty.
There's enough blame to go around, but the bottom line is the president could stop sequester in 45 minutes. All he has to do is call in his OMB director and make alternative cuts, sell them to the House and Senate, and sequester's over.
But back on the subject of campaigning, which is what Mitt Romney was expressing frustration. He wanted to see what he thought was more leadership and not campaigning. I mean, do you believe that there has been a hit to the president's credibility, given what may have been some ginned up fears about sequester in some areas?
Absolutely. The president's primary responsibility is to reassure the American people that if sequester happens, he is the chief executive. He runs the agencies to cause the least amount of disruption to the American people, not send his cabinet secretaries out to inflate the kind of pain that's going to be inflicted upon them. The president is really did a disservice to himself by saying the sky is falling and then admitting just this week that it's not going to be as bad as he said it was going to be.
Oh, I got to go. Bernard, great to see you. Brad, you too. Quickly.
Thanks. No, my point is actually the sky might not be falling right away, but $85 billion in cuts over even 5 or 6 years is a huge impact to the American economy when we're just starting to get the recovery back on its feet.
We'll leave it at that. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.